Welcome back to Lead Pouring 101. So you followed all the other videos, you've got your jig heads poured, you've got all that process dialed in, and now you're ready to powder coat. We're going to show you everything from some of the easiest methods all the way up to a little more in-depth and show you everything that you need to know on how to powder coat effectively. Thanks again for stopping by and joining us for today's episode. So we're going to cover a few different options when it comes to powder coating and powder painting. We're going to start off with this Stardust powder. It's more of a rubberized coating that does not require the need to be baked in a toaster oven. We're going to touch on a few of the standard Protek colors, which are probably some of the most common. We've got a few different options from Barlow's. They have their standard colors. They have their color shifting and chameleon colors in the Nova Stone lineup. And then they have a more glitter-based powder paint with their Razzle Dazzle and Double Dazzle lineup. So we'll show that as well. Then for anyone interested, we're going to show you how you can actually mix your own colors with just some clear powder coat and then your favorite mica powder. With all of that, you can also add glitter to some of those powder coats. So we'll kind of touch on that a little bit and show you guys everything you need to know so that you can decide which route you want to go when it comes to powder coating. We're going to start off with this Stardust powder paint. Like I said, it's a rubberized coating. All you need to use this is you need a heat source, you need your color of choice, and you need a cup of water, and that's it. It's pretty simple, it's pretty easy to use, and we'll show you guys how you can use this. And before we get started, I want to touch on heat. So just like the other videos, you're going to see a theme. Heat can be everything when it comes to making your own jigs. I'm going to recommend you get a heat gun that has a couple different settings on it. I'm going to recommend that you run it on the lowest setting that you can. So mine in particular just has a low and a high. I am always running it on low. The reason being, when you're running on low, your temperature is going to slowly rise. So as you're heating your jig head, you're going to be able to control your results a little bit better. If I've got that on high, my temperature is going to rise a lot faster. So if I hold that jig head over the heat for half a second longer, on low, that variation in temperature is not going to be nearly as much on that lower setting, whereas on a higher setting, that half a second can make a huge difference and cause inconsistent results. So I'm going to recommend a heat gun. You can use whatever you want. You can use a torch, you can use an alcohol burner, you can use whatever works for you, but I'm going to recommend getting a heat gun with settings and running it on low. And the most common question I get in relation to all of that is how long to heat the jig head. Well, there are a ton of variables that play into that. The size of the jig head will determine how long you need to heat it. A bigger jig head is going to need more time, a smaller jig head less time. How fast you dip it into your powder can play a factor. The type of powder you're using can play a factor. So there's a lot of variables, and that is where you are going to have to play with each one of those and kind of fine tune it and dial it into what works best for you. Not enough heat is going to be the side that you want to err on. If you get it too hot and you dip it, you're going to have so much powder paint on that jig head, it's going to fill in the hook eye, it's going to drip down the shank of the hook, it's going to make a mess. So if you're not sure, start out slow, work your way up. If the jig head is not hot enough, you're just not going to get a complete coat of powder on the jig head. All you have to do, reheat it just a little bit, re-dip it, and you're good to go. So when you're first starting out and trying to figure out how much heat to add, just start slow, slowly ramp up until you find that happy medium. Starting off with Stardust. Now, some of the benefits of Stardust is you don't have to wait on it to bake in a toaster oven. Once you heat it and dip it, you just dip it into a cup of water and you're done. The other big benefit of this is they claim it is unbreakable. So you can take a jig head once it's poured, smash it with a hammer, squeeze it in a vise, whatever you want, and that rubberized coating is going to flex around the jig and not chip off. Because as you know, with traditional powder coat, if you go out and drag a football jig all day across rocks, at the end of the day, most of that powder coat has chipped off of the bottom. That is not going to be the case with Stardust. Now, the only drawback to this is it can be a little bit more difficult to kind of refine your technique because it is a much thicker coating. And it does take, I feel like the learning curve with Stardust is slightly more than traditional powder coat. Now, the one area where I don't like Stardust are jigs like this brush jig, for example, that have a recessed line tie. Now, on jigs where the line tie sticks up above the jig head, you can easily just put a piece of heat shrink tubing on it or whatever you want to keep the paint out of that hook eye. So after you dip it, you can pull that tubing off, your hook eye stays nice and clean and open, you're good to go. Whereas on these recessed hook eyes, that's a little bit more difficult. Now there are guys that talk about putting a drop of water on it to keep it from sticking, shoving Play-Doh in there. There's a lot of things that people have tried to do to keep the powder paint out of recessed hook eyes. I just tend to lean more towards traditional powder coat for recessed hook eyes. But with all that being said, I'll bring you guys down here. I'll show you the process and how simple it is to use this Stardust. Alright, so what I like to do when I'm powder coating is I'll actually turn my heat gun on and let it run for about a minute just so that it's at full operating temperature. Now I think my microphone will cancel out the noise of that and you guys can still hear me, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, let it get going. Now with any powder coat or any sort of powder paint, if you're not using a fluid bed, which you can't use with this, what I like to do is just shake the cup up and make sure you're fluffing that powder paint up as much as possible. So I'll just kind of shake it up a little bit and then set it down. Now this is a 1/2 ounce football jig with my heat gun. About 3 to 4 seconds per side is the right amount of heat for me. So I'm going to show you in real time how I'm going to do this. So like I said, I'm just going to heat both sides about 3 to 4 seconds per side, maybe just a little bit longer. I do tend to heat my jig heads for Stardust a little bit more than traditional powder paint. But I'm just going to heat it up, dip it down in there, shake it off. Now what I like to do is at this point, I will pull the base hole pin out. I'll go ahead and add just a little bit more heat to that jig head. That's going to, because I don't know how well you can see it. It's kind of a rougher, what looks like a textured finish to it. It's very gritty. It's almost like sand. So when you reheat that, it's going to kind of smooth it out a little bit and make it a more finished look, I guess you could call it. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's a lot smoother and that more finished look to it. And then you're just going to dip it in your water for a couple seconds. And then I'll just put it on a piece of paper towel, let all that water drip off, and then you're ready to move on to the next one. Once you're done with that base hole pin, you can usually just slide all that powder right off the base hole pin and you're ready to go again. So here's a look at the finished product. It does smooth out, as you can see here on the head. It does come out to a nice smooth finish, but if you look at that hook eye, look at how small the opening is from where your line's going to go through. Now, like I said, this is a thicker coating because it's that rubberized coating, so it can cause you issues with the hook eye. Now, one way to eliminate that is just put some heat shrink over the eye, and I'll show you how to do that. So like I mentioned, you can just take a small piece of heat shrink tubing, put it over the hook eye, like that, and then as you're heating that up, it will shrink down and stick to the hook eye. Hopefully you can see that. And we'll do the same thing. We'll heat our jig the same amount of time we did before. We'll dip it into our coating. And then I'll do the same thing here that I did before. I'll go ahead and pull out the base hole pin, and then I'll actually go ahead and pull off that heat shrink tubing right now as well before I put the heat back onto the Stardust and get it set onto the jig head. And then I'll dip it back into the water. And you can see here with that heat shrink tubing over the hook eye, you have a nice clean hook eye with the Stardust. And it works great for, like I said, jigs like this where the hook comes up above the jig head. But as I mentioned, with recessed hook eyes, you're not going to get heat shrink to fit down over that. So that's where on these, Stardust may not be your best option. And just like that, that's how easy Stardust can be. You just heat your jig head, dip it, put it in water, and you're done. Now you're ready to put in your weed guard, tie your skirt, whatever you want to do, but that is Stardust. Now we're going to jump on over and we're going to show you some of the more traditional powder coats. Now moving on to traditional powder paints. Now what I mean by traditional powder paints, they are coatings that need to be baked in an oven to actually cure. Now, get a toaster oven from Walmart, thrift store, Amazon, wherever. Don't be baking this stuff in your house. Keep this away from the areas that you're going to bake your food to put in your mouth. Keep it all separate. Now with traditional powder coats, I'm going to show you a few different options, but these are not your only options. There are some automotive powder paint manufacturers that make some incredible colors that work very well on jig heads. However, some of them, the smallest amount of powder that they will sell are 1 pound bags. And some of them I've even seen to where they don't sell anything less than 10 pounds. So that is a ton of powder. So just keep that in mind if you're venturing away from lure making powder coats. Now with lure making, there are a couple different brands. The most common are going to be Barlow's and Protek. Now, which one should you choose? Well, that's easy. It's just whatever color you're looking for, who has it. Does Protek make it or does Barlow's make it? Just find the color you're looking for and go with it. They both make incredible products. And then one step further, Barlow's also has their Novastone line, which is a color shifting chameleon effect. And then they have glitter based powder paints in their Razzle Dazzle and Double Dazzle lineup. So if there's a color that's kind of a very sparkly standout color, maybe their Razzle Dazzle or Double Dazzle line has what you're looking for. Now the process for all of these is going to be relatively the same. You're going to heat your jig head, dip it just like we did with the Stardust, but when you're done, instead of dipping it into water, you're actually going to bake it in the oven. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a few different powder colors from each one, and then we'll bake everything at the very end. So we're going to start off. I'll show you a couple of the different Protek colors. These are a couple of my favorites. We've got matte green pumpkin and peanut butter and jelly. The matte finish colors I really like for a lot of my slower presentations like football jigs, stuff that I'm going to be dragging on the bottom. And I'll show you why I like traditional powder coats for the recessed hook eyes. So I'm just going to heat it just like I would anything else. And now this is going to be one of those things where you're going to have to refine your technique and figure out how long you need to heat your jig head to get full coverage, but not so much that you fill in that hook eye. Just like with the Stardust, after I dip it, I pull that little base hole pin out, go ahead, throw it under some heat. That just kind of helps set that powder coat and get it ready to start to bake. And this is why I like traditional powder coats for the recessed hook eyes. I get full, complete coverage of the jig, and that hook eye stays open. If your hook eyes are filling in, one of two things is your problem. You're either getting your jig head too hot or you're dipping it into your powder coat too long. Once you get it heated up, you just need to dip it and pull it right back out. You don't need to leave it in that powder for too long. And it's the same thing with all of these. I like to just give the containers a good shake prior to dipping, just to kind of fluff up that powder and make sure that it doesn't clump up on us. Dip it in, tap it on the edge, pull our base hole pin out, throw a little bit more heat on it, and there is your PB&J color. It's just a nice brown and then has that purple glitter in it. And to keep from boring you guys, I'm going to go ahead and just powder coat up a couple of my favorite ones from Barlow's. It's the exact same process as what I just showed you with the Protek. I'll show you some of my favorite colors in their standard colors, their Novastone color shifts, and some of their glitter paints. I'll go ahead and powder coat a couple of those, show you my favorites, and then I'll show you how to make two-tone or multicolored jigs. So a couple of my favorites in Barlow's standard line, you can see here they've got that awesome new bone color, and then on this side, this color is called shad gray. It makes a great belly color if you're doing a two-tone jig head or just a natural bait fish colored jig head on its own. In their Nova Stone color shifting line on the left, we've got Lava Crawl. That one works awesome for all of your red and crawl color patterns. And then on the right, we've got Monkey Milk. You can see here you get great shifting effects out of those powders. They just look incredible. If you want your jig to stand out just a little bit from the rest, these are some great options. And then in their Double Dazzle lineup, we've got Plum Sapphire over here and Fire Tiger over here. You can see they are very glittery, shiny jig heads. This is what I like to use for smaller, like crappie style jig heads. I think it works really good for those. And as you can see, super shiny, going to draw a lot of attention and produce a lot of flash. Now for solid colored jigs, that's all you've got to do. Now I'm going to show you how to do two-tone or multicolored jigs. All you need in addition to what you've just seen is some sort of little paintbrush. So all you've got to do for a two-tone or multicolored jig is just get your powders ready. So I like to, if I'm doing a two-tone, I like to dip the jig in the belly color and then use the brush and sprinkle on the top color. So what I'm going to do, just like for the others, I'm going to go ahead and preheat my jig head. I'm going to go ahead and dip it in the belly color. Now I'm going to put it back under heat for just a couple seconds. Then I'm going to bring it over. And I'm going to take that paintbrush and just sprinkle on that top color. And then again, throw a little bit of heat back on it. And now you have a two-tone jig head. And then one of the questions that I get quite often are jig heads like this that have screw lock keepers. How do you keep the powder paint out of the screw lock? Well, you don't. If you have your heat dialed and you're not dipping it too long or doing anything crazy, you won't have any issues. Your screw locks will stay nice and clean and open. You should never have issues. If you're getting so much powder in your screw lock or whatever the case that it's causing you issues, you're applying way too much powder. You don't need that much powder. And as you can see here, I didn't do anything to these screw locks. I just dipped them just like I would do anything else, and they stay nice and clean. And along the same lines of things filling in with powder, I have a lot of people ask me about the hook eye. Now you're going to see some people who use the heat shrink tubing on every single jig that they make to ensure the hook eye stays nice and clean. Now me personally, on my large full-size jigs that have larger hooks, I don't cover them. I just powder coat them and go on about my day. I have no issues. Now, the exception are small hooks. If I'm making these little bitty finesse jigs where I've got a tiny hook, or you crappie guys that are using really small hooks, that is where I would go ahead and put heat shrink over the hook eye to ensure that that doesn't fill in, because on these very small hooks, just the slightest amount of paint can cause issues. Or if you're one of those people that just want a perfect hook eye every time, go with the heat shrink, keep your hooks nice and clean, and you won't have any issues. And when it comes to baking these in the oven, I bake all of my normal colors at 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. Now, why do I say normal? Because your fluorescent and candy colors, like your chartreuses, your lime truces, those really bright fluorescent colors, I back my temperature down to about 275. If you bake those colors at 350 like your other jigs, that powder paint almost looks like it melts off the jig head, and you're not going to get the desired results that you're looking for. So those are the only things that I separate. I will bake all of my normal stuff 350 for 20 to 25 minutes, and then my candy and fluorescent colors I'll back down to about 275. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the oven and let them start baking and curing. And while we're doing that, for those of you that want to go a little bit further down this rabbit hole, I'm going to show you how you can make your own powder coat, as well as take some of your favorite soft plastic glue or making additives and incorporate that into powder coat. When it comes to making your own powder coat, you're just going to need some clear powder and then your mica powder of choice. Now, I have a dedicated video on my channel. You can go back and look at that, so I'm not going to dive super deep into it. But for all of you that do make your own powder coat, Barlow's now offers these 2-ounce bottles on their website, and it makes it much easier for making your own powder coat. Now, all I do is I you can start, because depending on what mica powder you use is going to kind of vary the ratio that you're going to mix your clear powder to your mica powder. I would start with about 6 parts of clear powder coat to 1 part mica powder, and then just kind of adjust as needed. Now you can not only make the powder coat with your mica powder of choice, but you can also add glitter to your powder coats. Now, the 2 companies that I will recommend are Bait Plastics and Barlow's for glitter. Those 2 companies, I have had very good luck with the glitter that I'm using holding up in powder coat. I haven't tested some of the others, so they may work, they may not, but I know Bait Plastics and Barlow's, I've had really good luck adding their glitter. When I'm making my own powder coats and trying to refine the colors, what I'll do, in the hook video I made, I told you guys not to buy junk hooks. The one exception is I will buy the cheapest possible hook I can buy for whatever jig head I want to test it on. And what I'll do is I'll refine my colors using those. And then what I do, some of you may have noticed some of my powder coat colors are numbered. Once I dial in that color, I'll save that jig head, put a piece of tape on it, and write the number along with the corresponding number of the powder. That way, if I ever, because there's some colors I haven't poured in forever, and if I forget what they look like, I can go back, match up the jig head to the number on the cup, and I know exactly what it's going to look like. So it's pretty easy to make your own. I'm just going to take this clear powder, and I'm going to scoop some into my container. And now the amount of powder that you're doing is just going to be what you're using it for. If I want enough powder to where I can dip the whole jig down into it like you saw earlier, I'm going to add more powder. If it's just an accent color where the only thing I'm going to be doing is dipping a brush in and brushing it on, I'll mix it a little bit less. You just tailor it to however much you're going to be making. So for this particular color, all this is going to be is an accent color, so I'm only going to put about that much in the jar. So that's my clear powder coat, and now I'm just going to take the mica powder of my choice and just add a little. Like I said, just a rough idea. Go start out about 6 parts of clear powder to 1 part of your mica powder, and that's just a rough estimate of where to get started. Each mica powder's potency is going to be a little bit different. So you're just going to have to play around with it. And it's kind of like making soft plastics. You just flavor it to your taste. If you want it to be a little more concentrated, add a little more mica powder into it. You can make semi-translucent colors by using less mica powder. You can play around with it and make pretty much whatever you want. So I'm going to add just a little bit more to this one. And then all you have to do from there, just put your lid on it and shake it up. That's going to mix that mica powder in with that clear powder coat and give you that color of powder coat now. And then it's the same thing with glitter. So I want to add a little bit of glitter to this. All I'm going to do is take my glitter, and I'm not even going to use a scooper. Just like I keep saying with soft plastics, just, I don't know, about that much. And then when I'm testing these, I'll start off with a little bit of glitter. If I want more, just add more, and I just play around with it. And you can see it's that simple. It took us, I don't know, 30 seconds, and now we have a nice blue color with some chartreuse glitter. And now you've got your powder coat ready to go, and you can powder coat just like you would with a normal one. And the other additive that I was talking about earlier are your favorite 8-Bit Baits products. You can add these products directly into your containers of powder coat, or one of the things I've done, I have just a clear powder with every single 8-Bit Bait product that they have. And what you can do, and I'll show you here in just a second, I'm going to dip one jig head in just straight black, and then I'm going to dip one in black, and then I'm going to dip it into this, and I'll show you the cool effects you can get adding some of these soft plastic products into your powder coats. So here's the jig head just dipped in standard black powder coat. Now this is that same jig head that was dipped in black and then dipped in that 8-Bit Baits Sonic powder. As you can see here, you can get some crazy awesome results using the 8-Bit Bait powders. Now you don't have to use it on a black base, however, they do show up a little bit better on the darker base colors. But as you can see right there, you can get some awesome results kind of tinkering with the stuff meant for soft plastics in your lead pouring. And there you have it. That's everything that you need to know as far as powder coating. Now, someone's probably going to want to know about fluid beds. Fluid beds, I feel like, are just for if you're making large quantities of lures or if you're making a ton of the same color. For the most part, I don't use fluid beds. I have no problem just dipping right out of the container that the powder coat comes in. And since this is Lead Pouring 101, we're keeping it basic. If you want to learn more about fluid beds, there are a ton of videos out there showing you how you can make them, buy them, and go further into it. But that is just the basics of what you need. You can see with the Stardust, you can keep it pretty simple. You don't need to bake it. You can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want. Now, one thing I do want to touch on when it comes to making your own powder coats, don't overlook some of those additives like your 8-bit bait products, your highlight powder. Some of those additives can be used in powder coat and give you fantastic results. So if you're going to go that far and start making your own, just have fun with it, play around with it, and as you can see, the possibilities are endless. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. I hope you're still liking this series, and if you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one.